He stood up for a man everyone else ignored, an 84-year-old veteran knocked to the ground like his service meant nothing. 30 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up, and with it came a miracle he never expected, wrapped in grief legacy and the quiet beginning of love. If stories of courage, quiet kindness, and unexpected grace speak to your heart, we invite you to subscribe. Here we don't just tell stories, we remember what truly matters. Let's begin. The bell above the diner door jingled, cutting through the hum of low conversation and the soft clatter of forks against ceramic. Bo Kessler stepped inside, holding the door open for his 7-year-old daughter, Lila. A few regulars looked up, nodded. Others kept eating. It was the kind of place where you didn't need to say much. People noticed without announcing that they noticed. "Same booth?" Lila asked, clutching her sketch pad. Bo gave a faint smile. Wouldn't feel like Saturday without it. They slid into the far corner by the window that faced the street. Part habit, part comfort. Bo glanced around. The coffee was already brewing. The waitress behind the counter, Ruthie, gave a wink. "I'll have your stack started," she called. Bo raised 2 fingers in thanks. Lila opened her sketch pad and began to draw, her brow furrowed in soft concentration. She always started with the eyes. They tell the truth, she'd once said, and Bo never had the heart to correct her. Then the door jingled again. An elderly man shuffled in, leaning heavily on a wooden cane, worn smooth at the grip. He wore a faded army jacket frayed at the cuffs and a tan cap with a single embroidered patch Korea. His frame was slight back hunched, but his eyes scanned the room with deliberate dignity. Nobody looked up. He walked to the counter and stood there for a moment. "Excuse me," he said, voice gravelly but steady. "Do you have water?" "No ice." The man at the bar, young, broad-shouldered, all ego in a leather vest, snorted. "Sit down, Grandpa. This ain't the VA." The room tensed. Ruthie hesitated behind the counter. The old man straightened as much as he could, the pride in his bones refusing to buckle. "I served in this town before most of you were born." The guy in the vest rose, turned, and with a single push to the shoulder, sent the old man stumbling backward. His cane clattered to the floor. Bo was already standing. He moved without a word, reached the man just in time to catch his arm and stop the fall. With a hand on the small of the veteran's back, Bo helped him regain balance, then guided him gently to a seat nearby. He picked up the cane and placed it in the man's lap before turning to the one who pushed him. "You know," Bo said quietly, but his voice filled the diner. "I once saw a man stand between a child and a wall of fire. He didn't ask if the kid was worth saving. He didn't ask if someone else would do it. He just stepped in." The guy in the vest scoffed. "What's that got to do with?" Bo took a step forward. His voice dropped a half octave. That man wore the same patch on his cap. The diner fell into silence. Bo turned to the others, now his voice steady. "Every single one of us sitting here sipping coffee and eating pancakes does so because men like him stood in places we'll never fully understand. You don't owe him your seat. You owe him your silence if you can't offer respect." No one spoke. The man in the vest shifted uncomfortably, then backed away. He muttered something Bo didn't care to catch, and left the diner, the bell jingling in his wake. Bo let out a slow breath and turned back to the old man. "You okay, sir?" The veteran nodded, adjusting his cane. "You didn't have to do that." Bo pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "Yes, sir. I did." Lila had stopped drawing. She was watching now. Eyes wide, her pencil paused mid-stroke. "I'm Ira," the man said, extending a shaking hand. "Bo," he replied, taking it firmly. "And this is my daughter, Lila." Lila gave a small smile and held up her sketch pad. She had drawn Ira's face, gentle lines around the eyes, the military cap just right. "That's me?" Ira asked. "Almost," she said. "I didn't get your smile yet." For the first time that morning, Ira smiled. The diner began to breathe again. A few people looked ashamed. Others just stared at their plates. Ruthie brought a glass of water to Ira, her hands trembling slightly. Bo sat back, letting the weight of the moment settle in his bones. He wasn't used to attention. He didn't want thanks. But something about Ira, his silence, his presence, had stirred something long dormant. Maybe it was the way the world seemed to forget people like Ira. Or maybe it was the way Lila looked at him, like she saw something important others missed. They talked for a few minutes. Nothing deep, just names where they lived, how the mornings had been colder than usual. Bo didn't press. He could tell Ira wasn't a man who spoke unless it mattered. Then just as Bo was asking Ruthie for the check, a low rumble built outside. A sleek black SUV pulled into the gravel lot. It didn't belong to anyone from around here. The engine cut. The doors opened. Bo turned to look, and everything for a moment felt like it was about to change. The SUV's doors opened in silence, as if even the machine sensed the reverence of the moment it was interrupting. Out stepped a woman. Mid-30s. Tailored navy coat, dark jeans, tan boots dusted with gravel. Her posture was poised, but her expression unraveled as soon as her eyes fell on the window, on the man inside the diner, sitting with a water glass trembling in his hand. She pushed the door open. The bell jingled. Conversation stopped again, though this time not out of shock. There was something arresting about her presence, controlled sharp yet undeniably human. A few people recognized her. Not personally, but from magazine covers, the business section, maybe a documentary on philanthropy. Ellis Marin, CEO, heiress, billionaire, founder of 3 nonprofits, owner of none of the pretense you'd expect. Her eyes scanned the room with urgency, then softened. She crossed the floor in swift strides, knelt beside Ira, and cupped his weathered hands in hers. "Dad," she whispered, voice cracking. "What happened?" Ira looked at her, smiled faintly, and nodded toward Bo. "He happened." Ellis turned, meeting Bo's gaze for the first time. He wasn't sure what he expected. Gratitude, maybe. Or a rehearsed thank you from someone used to handling things with signatures and press statements. Instead, her eyes welled up. She blinked fast, composing herself. You were with him." Bo nodded. He was pushed. Looked like he might hit the floor. "I caught him. That's all." "No," she said softly. "It's not all. Most people wouldn't have moved." Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just dense, full of the weight of something neither had the language for yet. "I saw it," she added. "My phone. Dad's device has a panic function, sends me a location feed, and turns on audio. I heard your voice." Bo looked away, instinctively uneasy with praise. "I just said what needed to be said." Ellis studied him a moment. "What's your name?" "Bo Kessler. This is my daughter, Lila." Lila waved, shy but curious, then returned to her sketching. She had already started drawing Ellis without even thinking. "You're both extraordinary." Ellis said more to herself than anyone else. Ruthie brought over a fresh pot of coffee, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Miss Marin," she said, offering a small nod. "We're glad your father's okay." Ellis thanked her and turned back to Ira. "You shouldn't be out without telling me." Ira's lips twitched into a half-smile. "If I'd told you, you'd have sent a driver. I came to get pancakes and remember who I used to be. Turns out I needed to meet who I forgot I could still be." Bo's chest tightened at that. Ellis sat beside her father, but her gaze kept drifting back to Bo. "Do you have time to talk later? I'd like to thank you properly." "I'm not looking for thanks," Bo said. "That's exactly why I want to," she replied. After breakfast, Ellis insisted on walking Ira to her SUV herself. As they reached the door, Lila slipped a folded paper into Ira's hand. "It's you," she said, but smiling. Ira chuckled, opened the drawing and blinked fast, as if the pencil lines carried more weight than they should have. "You're good," he said. "You see things other people miss." Lila shrugged. "That's what Daddy says." Outside, as Ellis opened the SUV door, Ira paused. "You should talk to him," he murmured to his daughter. "That man has known loss. The real kind. Maybe that's why he sees people like me." Ellis nodded. "He doesn't seem the type to open up." "He did," Ira said, without a single word about himself. A few hours later, Bo was back at his workshop, running his palm across a slab of cedar. It was a quiet day. Lila was at her drawing class, and the house echoed with the kind of stillness he both welcomed and resented. Then a knock at the door. He opened it to find Ellis standing on the porch, holding 2 coffees in a cardboard tray and a large envelope under one arm. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied. "But then I realized I never actually thanked you. You already did. Not properly." She held out a coffee. "Black 2 sugars. Ruthie told me." Bo took it, eyebrows raised. That woman knows everything. They sat on the bench outside his shop, the wood sun warmed beneath them. "Your father's sharp," Bo said. Ellis smiled. "He taught me everything I know about grit. But now he forgets where he puts his keys. He's quieter. Sometimes he stares out the window, and I know he's back there somewhere none of us can follow." Bo nodded slowly. Maybe that's why it meant so much. For someone to say he still matters. He does. I didn't mean from you. I meant from people who never knew him. Strangers, waitresses, little girls. A pause. Then Ellis opened the envelope and handed him a flyer. "Next weekend, I'm hosting a retreat at my family's veteran recovery center. It's not open to the public, but I want you and Lila to come. As my guests." Bo blinked. Why, Ellis looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Because I think you've forgotten who you used to be too." The Marin retreat was nothing like Bo had expected. Nestled among rolling hills an hour outside town, it looked more like an old summer camp than anything owned by a billionaire. Weathered cabins, a small lake, glinting under the sun, gravel paths, shaded by tall oaks. It didn't scream wealth, it whispered peace. Bo parked his truck near a wooden welcome sign carved with the words, "Honor, Restore, Belong." Lila leaned forward in the passenger seat, her sketch pad already open on her lap. "Can I draw the lake first?" "You can draw whatever you want," Bo said, turning off the engine. "Just remember to stay where I can see you. I'll be near the bench." He followed her gaze. A wide wooden bench sat under a tree near the lake, weathered but sturdy, like it had been waiting for someone for a long time. Ellis met them by the welcome cabin dressed in jeans and a soft gray flannel shirt, a surprising contrast to the woman who had walked into the diner in designer boots. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked less like a CEO and more like someone trying to remember how to be human again. "Hey," she said, smiling. "Glad you made it." Bo nodded, keeping his hands in his jacket pockets. "It's a nice place." "I come here when I can't breathe," she replied. Figured I'd share it with someone who looked like he was holding his breath. Bo gave her a sidelong glance. "I breathe just fine." "Do you?" He didn't answer. They walked the gravel path in silence for a bit, until they reached the bench Lila had claimed as her drawing post. "Ira used to sit here," Ellis said quietly, brushing her hand across the back of the bench. "When we first opened this place, before the memory loss got worse, he said the bench reminded him of Korea because it faced water, and the enemy always came from the other side." Bo looked out at the lake. The water shimmered with sunlight dragonflies darting just above the surface. "I was never in the military," he said. But I knew what it felt like to wait for something you couldn't see, and hope it didn't take everything. Ellis turned to him. Your wife, Bo, gave a slow nod. Fire. Apartment building. She went back in for a neighbor's baby. I was on shift across town when the call came in. By the time I got there, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ellis sat down on the bench. You ever talk about it? I don't even think about it, he said too fast. She tilted her head. You just did. A long silence followed. Lila, a few feet away, was humming softly, lost in her drawing. Bo finally sat beside Ellis, the bench creaking under his weight. Some mornings, I forget. Just for a second. I reach for her side of the bed. Then Lila stirs, and it comes back, like a cold wind. Ellis nodded slowly. I never lost a spouse. But I lost my father piece by piece. The worst part wasn't watching him forget me. It was realizing I'd forgotten who he was when he was whole. I only ever saw the hero, not the man. Bo studied her face. There was something honest in it. Now, no boardroom polish, no public mask. Just a daughter grieving in a way only grown-up daughters do. Ira's proud of you, he said. I'm not sure I deserve it, she replied. Maybe that's what makes it real. Ellis looked over at Lila. She's remarkable. She's the one who got me out of bed the first week after everything. Left me a note on the bathroom mirror. Just a stick figure drawing of a smiley face, and the words, "Try again tomorrow, Daddy." Ellis chuckled softly, hand over her heart. That'll do it. They sat there for a long time, not needing to speak, just watching Lila sketch the trees swaying gently in the wind. Then Ellis stood. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. She led Bo to a cabin at the far end of the path. Inside was a wide-open space, more workshop than office. Framed photographs lined the walls, veterans with their families, children drawing beside soldiers, and therapy volunteers, building garden beds together. In the back corner stood a tall cabinet. Ellis opened it and pulled out a dusty, half-built rocking chair. I started this with my dad, she said. We never finished it. He lost interest, or forgot why we started. I thought maybe she hesitated. Suddenly shy, maybe you could help me finish it. Bo walked over, ran his hand along the smooth wood arm. Who's it for? Ellis looked up at him. For no one. For everyone. Maybe to sit on that bench by the lake. Maybe just to finish something I never got to finish with him. Bo gave a slow nod. Okay, but we're doing it right. Old school. No shortcuts, she smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. That evening back at the bench, Lila handed Ellis a fresh drawing. It was the lake, the bench, and two figures sitting side by side. The woman had her hair tied back, and the man had lines on his face, but not in his eyes. You drew us, Ellis said. Lila nodded. But I made you both younger. Why, so you remember better, Lila said. That's what Daddy says art can do. Help people remember the right parts. Bo watched Ellis as she looked down at the drawing. Her fingers curled around the paper like it was made of glass. And in the soft evening light on a bench, built for two-something, began not loudly, not all at once, but like a door quietly opening. The sky had taken on the deep amber hue of early fall, and the retreat glowed under its touch. Somewhere between the trees, birds called to one another, and the wind rustled like it had secrets to tell. In a cabin tucked away from the main circle, Bo sat beside Lila as she finished her newest sketch. It was a portrait. A man with lines worn deep into his brow. Sharp eyes. A small, stubborn smile. Who's that? Bo asked gently, already knowing. It's Mr. Ira, Lila said. I want to give it to him before we leave tomorrow. She shaded the corner of the jacket with careful strokes, then reached for her red pencil to add the faded Korean War patch. I drew him sitting taller, she added. Because he should. Bo swallowed the lump in his throat. He'll love it. He's like a tree, Lila murmured. Old, but he still gives shade. Bo couldn't find words for a while. Sometimes she said things that made him feel both ancient and young at the same time. Later that morning, Ellis appeared at the cabin door holding a cloth bundle wrapped in ribbon. I brought you something, she said, stepping inside with a cautious smile. Bo raised an eyebrow. Is that a bribe? Depends on how picky you are about wood grain, she quipped. Inside the bundle was a stack of cherrywood boards, rich, warm, straight as arrows. Bo ran his fingers along the smooth edges. For the chair, Ellis said. I thought, maybe we could build two. One for the bench, and one for someone who doesn't think he needs it. Bo looked up, meeting her gaze. There was no challenge in her eyes, only invitation. He gave a quiet nod. We'll need glue clamps and more coffee. That afternoon, Lila skipped ahead of them toward Ira's cabin, sketch pad in hand, humming something tuneless, but soft. Ellis walked beside Bo on the gravel path, arms folded, eyes on the girl. She's incredible, she said. She's everything, Bo replied simply. She seems to see the world the way my dad used to talk about it, as if the quiet things matter more. Bo nodded. She notices who's left out, who hasn't been spoken to. She doesn't like noise, but she listens harder than anyone I know. They arrived at Ira's door, and Ellis knocked twice before stepping in. The room smelled of old paper and peppermint. Ira sat by the window in a rocking chair he hadn't built himself, but had worn into familiarity. When he saw them, his face brightened, not with the vague recognition of someone trying to place a name, but with genuine light. Afternoon, he rasped. Lila walked straight to him and handed him the portrait. It's you, she said. But the strong you, like when you were younger. I made your shoulders taller. Ira took the drawing, carefully holding it like a relic. His lips parted, but no words came. For a long moment, he simply looked. Then quietly, he whispered, I haven't seen myself like this in decades. Ellis stepped behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I think it's how you really are, Lila added. Not the tired parts, the hero parts. Ira blinked fast, then chuckled through a tight throat. You're quite the artist, little one. Maybe, Lila shrugged, but Daddy says art is just a mirror for people who forgot how to look. Bo pressed a knuckle to his lips. The words settled into him with a weight he hadn't expected. Ellis crouched beside her father. She sees you, Dad. I do too, even when you think we don't. Ira looked at his daughter, then long and slow, like he was trying to memorize her. You came late, he said softly. I know, she replied, her voice cracking. But I'm here now. He nodded once, a royal gesture, in a room filled with grace. Outside the cabin, Bo and Ellis walked in silence again, though this time it wasn't filled with the unknown. It was the silence of two people holding something sacred between them. She gives people back to themselves, Ellis said, finally referring to Lila. I've never seen anything like it. Neither have I, Bo said, his voice low. When my wife died, I didn't think I could be any kind of father. I didn't think I could feel anything again. But you do. Not all the time, but more than I did before I met you. Ellis stopped walking. What changed? Bo looked toward the trees where Lila was now chasing a leaf down the hill. I saw my daughter give an old man a new image of himself. And I saw a woman, powerful, brilliant, choose to kneel beside that man, not because she had to, but because she wanted to remember who she really was. Ellis exhaled, blinking hard. You make it sound like I've done something noble. You have, he said. You just don't know it yet. That evening, As the sun dropped behind the hills, Bo sat alone in the workshop, running his hand across the cherrywood again. He looked over at the second unfinished chair, then picked up the first leg joint they had sanded that morning. He wasn't building furniture. He was building something he thought had been buried in ashes years ago. Something like hope. The sky broke open just after dusk. It began with a hush, the kind of unnatural quiet that makes even birds fall still. Then came the wind, sharp, sudden, rattling the branches and sending leaves skittering across the gravel like warnings. Bo stood on the porch of his cabin, eyes on the distant tree line, where clouds thickened into something heavy. He'd seen storms like this before, the kind that changed everything, even if they only lasted an hour. "Daddy." Lila's voice floated out from behind him. "Pack up your pencil, sweetheart," he said calmly. "Looks like we're in for a rough night." A moment later, he heard tiny feet scrambling across the wooden floor inside. Bo stepped down to the path and looked toward the main building where retreat staff were already pulling in chairs and flipping over benches. That's when he saw her Ellis walking fast against the wind, her hair whipping free from its tie. She wore no jacket, just a thin sweater hugging her shoulders, and her arms were wrapped tight across her chest. Bo stepped forward. "What are you doing out in this, Ira?" she said breathlessly. "I had to get him back to town before the roads closed. I barely made it to his place. By the time I left, the sheriff was already blocking Route 12. You drove in that she shrugged water, pooling at her collarbones. It wasn't that bad when I left. But now the hill's washed out. I can't get back to town tonight." Bo hesitated for only a second. "Come inside. You're not staying in that car." She nodded, soaked to the bone teeth starting to chatter. By the time they got Ellis inside Bo's cabin, the rain was falling in sheets. Thunder rolled low like a drumbeat in the earth's chest. Lila stood by the window, watching the storm with big eyes but calm shoulders. She'd always been unafraid of storms, only the sudden silences in between. "I'll make tea," Bo said, moving instinctively to the small kitchenette. Ellis peeled off her wet sweater, revealing a long-sleeved t-shirt, clinging to her arms. "Sorry for the intrusion," she said. "Not an intrusion," Bo replied without turning. "You brought cherrywood. You're practically family." She let out a small laugh, surprised by how easily it came. Bo handed her a towel. "You dry off. I'll check the backup lanterns." The storm knocked out power shortly after 8. They lit 2 oil lamps and gathered in the living room. Lila curled under a blanket on the couch, sketching quietly by lantern light. Ellis sat on the floor, beside her hair, drying in wild curls, cheeks flushed from the heat of the fire Bo had managed to start. "This is kinda cozy," she admitted. Bo sat across from her, legs crossed. "It's a little like camping, but with better tea." Ellis glanced at Lila. Has she ever camped for real? "She doesn't like tents," Bo said. "Too closed in. She likes open skies. Says the stars make her feel less small." Ellis looked at him long and quiet. "Did she get that from you or from her mom?" Bo hesitated. Her mom mostly. Claire was the dreamer. "I just built the porch she stood on." "What about you?" Ellis asked. "What were you like before?" Bo stared into the fire. "Before the fire, I was always in motion. Projects, community calls. I believed in being useful. After, I believed in just getting through the day." Ellis's voice softened. And now he looked up, met her eyes. "Now I'm wondering if I stopped too soon." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the storm rattled the windows like it was trying to eavesdrop. Inside, the quiet felt sacred. Ellis finally said, "You know, I used to think healing was linear, like ticking boxes. Therapy, yoga, journaling. But I think healing is sometimes just sitting in a room with someone who doesn't expect you to be fixed." Bo leaned forward slightly. "Or someone who remembers what you looked like before you broke. They didn't touch, didn't need to. but the distance between them felt smaller than ever. Later, after Lila had fallen asleep on the couch, Bo offered Ellis the bedroom. "I'll take the chair," he said. She looked toward the rocking chair, the one they had begun building together, and just finished assembling that afternoon. "You sure?" "Yeah, besides, I want to test it." She smiled. "If it creaks, I'll fix it myself." Bo chuckled, grabbing an extra blanket. "Deal." Ellis paused at the doorway, then turned. "Bo, yeah, thank you. For tonight. For the porch. For seeing me, not just the headlines, and the money." He nodded, voice low. It's easy to see someone when they stop hiding. She didn't say anything more, just closed the door softly behind her. Bo sat in the rocker, the fire down to embers, listening to the rain ease. The storm had passed, but something else had arrived in its place. Not passion, not even romance. Something steadier, quieter, a kind of knowing. He looked at the unfinished plans for the second chair and smiled to himself. Tomorrow they'd build again. And maybe not only with wood. The morning after the storm came in quietly like an apology. The trees dripped with leftover rain, mist hung low along the grass, and the retreat usually buzzing with soft conversation, and bird calls felt reverent, almost hushed. The world had exhaled. Bo stood on the porch with a cup of coffee watching the sun push through the thinning clouds. From inside he could hear the gentle creak of the newly finished rocking chair and the light rhythm of Lila's footsteps as she moved about the cabin. Ellis stepped outside a moment later, still barefoot hair pulled into a low knot. She looked rested, though something in her expression said her mind had been active all night. "You sleep all right?" he asked. "I did," she said. Then added, "Surprisingly well, actually." Bo handed her the second cup of coffee he'd prepared. "You're officially welcome to crash here during any future apocalypse." She smiled into her mug. "I might take you up on that." They sat in silence for a while side by side on the porch steps, watching Lila feed birds from the railing with crumbled biscuit pieces. A squirrel darted down a tree trunk, nearby snatched a crumb and fled. Ellis tilted her head toward Bo. "You've mentioned Claire, your wife, a few times. I hope it's not too much to ask, but would you tell me more about her?" Bo didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the horizon, but his hands tightened slightly around the mug. "She was better than me in most ways," he said quietly. "Smarter, funnier, brave in a way that didn't ask to be seen." Ellis turned toward him, legs folded beneath her. Bo continued, voice low but steady. "I met her on a volunteer build for a firehouse fundraiser. She couldn't hammer a nail straight to save her life, but she kept showing up. I asked her out over spilled paint and bruised thumbs. He chuckled once, a sound full of warmth and ghosts. She taught 4th grade. Thought kids were just little adults with honest mouths. She was right. They adored her." Ellis watched him closely, not interrupting. Bo's gaze drifted downward. The fire was in a neighboring building. Gas leak. She ran in to help a neighbor get their baby out. She got the baby clear, but the stairwell collapsed behind her on the second run. He paused, swallowed hard. "I was 2 blocks away. By the time I got there, it was too late. I could still smell her shampoo in the air, but she was already gone." Ellis blinked back sudden tears. "I'm so sorry." Bo nodded, not out of dismissal, but because there was nothing else to say. "For months, I blamed the delay, the shift, the dispatcher, even the weather. Then I blamed her. Then myself. Eventually, the only thing I had left to blame was time, because it kept moving forward without her." Ellis reached out slowly, laid a hand gently on his arm. He didn't flinch. "And Lila?" she asked. She was 5, didn't understand at first. She thought Claire was on a trip. For weeks she kept drawing airports. Bo looked down, his voice nearly a whisper. Then she drew a burning house, and she stopped speaking for a month. Ellis closed her eyes, heart aching. She's so bright, so tender. It's hard to imagine that. She came back to me through drawing, he said. It was the only language we both understood when words stopped working. He looked at Ellis now, his eyes clear despite the weight in them.
That's what the burn marks did to us. They didn't just take her. They changed how we lived, how we saw each other, how we let others see us. Ellis's hand was still on his arm, and now I still miss her. Every day. But lately,
I don't feel like I'm betraying her by smiling, or by building something new. They sat in that honesty for a long time, no rush to move past it. Then Ellis said softly, Ira used to say that grief is a country you visit often, but don't have to live in forever. Bo exhaled. He's a wise man. She nodded. He also once told me that I'm so good at holding other people up. I forgot how to lean. Bo glanced at her. Do you ever lean? She met his gaze. I'm learning. Later that day, they returned to the workshop. Bo measured a new beam, while Ellis sanded the armrest of the second chair. Her hands moved with growing confidence, though her motions still held a touch of hesitation, like someone reacquainting themselves with trust. Do you always work in silence? She asked. Only with people who talk too much, he replied with a faint smirk. She grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. Bo drilled 2 screws, then leaned back. You're better at this than you think. Ellis set down the sanding block. Maybe I'm just better at letting someone else lead for once. Bo raised an eyebrow. That hard for you? Terrifying, she said. When you run companies, people follow you because of what you represent, not because of who you are. Bo nodded. And who are you, Ellis Marin? She took a long breath, considered it. A woman who's tired of impressing the wrong people. He didn't say anything, but the way he looked at her solid, steady, told her he understood. Completely. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the pines, Lila came into the workshop holding a new drawing. She handed it to Ellis. This is you and Daddy. Ellis unfolded it gently. 2 figures side by side sitting on a porch under a star-lit sky. The woman had a hand on the man's arm. The man had a smile that reached his eyes. Ellis looked down at Lila. Why are there stars? Because that's when people remember. Lila said. When everything else is quiet. Bo placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, grateful for her gentle brilliance. Ellis folded the drawing, tucked it into her coat, like it was made of gold. And just like that, a day marked by burned scars and hard truths ended not in grief, but in a quiet kind of healing, like the slow closing of a wound, long left open. The workshop smelled of cedar dust, and something warmer, something human. Sunlight streamed in through the large window panes, settling across the work table like a quiet blessing. Bo stood at the center, a sanding block in one hand, measuring tape in the other, while Ellis held a curved armrest between her palms, like it might speak to her if she listened closely enough. She had already stained one hand with walnut oil, and there was a faint smudge of pencil on her cheek, but she didn't care. Not here. You're lining it up wrong, Bo said gently. Ellis frowned, rotated the armrest a few degrees. How about now? Still wrong, he said, a playful glint in his eye. But impressively consistent. She gave him a mock glare. You know I've closed multi-million-dollar deals with less condescension. Then maybe it's time you learned to close something with dovetail joints. They both laughed, real unguarded laughter that filled the room like music. Outside, Lila sat under the old elm tree, drawing a new scene from memory, the inside of the workshop, where something invisible but beautiful was clearly taking shape. By late morning, the second chair was halfway built. Bo watched Ellis move around the shop with growing confidence. She was clumsy, yes, but deliberate. Her fingers found balance in the weight of wood, her steps less hesitant now. "Why a rocking chair?" she asked, wiping sweat from her brow with the sleeve of her flannel. Bo paused mid-measure. "My dad built them. Said it was the one kind of seat that forgave you if you didn't sit still." Ellis smiled softly. "I like that. Claire, my wife, used to say the same thing. When Lila was a baby, she'd rock her to sleep every night. After she passed, I couldn't sit in that chair for months." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Ellis simply nodded and handed him a chisel. They worked through lunch. Not because they were in a hurry, but because the act of building together felt like something sacred. Ellis spoke less, but when she did, her words were slower, more thoughtful, less polished, more real. "You know," she said after a while, "I used to think success meant building something that outlived you. A company, a legacy, something with your name on the side of a building." And now Ellis leaned her hip against the bench, her fingers tracing the outline of a newly cut backrest. "Now I think success might just be building something that makes one person feel safe." Bo set his tool down, looked at her. "You've built that here?" She looked up a touch surprised. "Have I?" He nodded. "For Lila. For me. Even for yourself, I think." She didn't reply, but her smile lingered longer than usual. That afternoon, Lila wandered into the workshop holding 2 chocolate chip cookies in a napkin. "These are bribes," she said plainly, "to get you two to come outside." Ellis chuckled. "Is it working?" "Cookie first," Lila said, holding one out. "Then answer." Bo took his and bit into it. "I'm convinced." Ellis broke off a corner of hers, savoring it slowly. "All right," she said. "We'll come." The 3 of them walked down to the lake together. It was still and glassy, reflecting the clouds like a watercolor painting. A canoe bobbed against the dock, and a breeze moved gently across the surface. Lila skipped stones, each one bouncing once or twice, before disappearing beneath the ripples. Ellis sat on the dock with her shoes off, dipping her toes into the water. "Ira and I used to come here in the early days of the retreat," she said, her voice distant. "He'd sit in the canoe and talk about the war like it happened to someone else. But when he talked about my mom," she paused, "that was when he cried." Bo sat beside her, knees drawn up, watching Lila from a distance. "He still talks about her." Ellis shook her head. "Not anymore. Some days I'm not even sure he remembers being married." There was grief in her voice, but not the kind that stung. It was softer now. Worn in. "I think memory isn't just in the mind," Bo said. "Sometimes it's in what we do, what we carry forward." Ellis looked at him, eyes wide. "Like the chair." He nodded. "Or the porch. Or the way you hold your coffee mug with both hands like he used to." She looked down, stunned that he'd noticed. "It's not forgetting that hurts the most," he added. "It's the fear that what mattered might disappear when no one says it out loud." Ellis felt her throat tighten. "Would you say her name?" Claire Bo hesitated, then nodded slowly. Claire. She loved sunflowers. Couldn't cook to save her life, but made the best cold cereal arrangements you've ever seen. And she believed, truly, believed that one kind word could reroute someone's whole day. Ellis smiled through tears. "Sounds like someone I would have liked." "She would have liked you too," he said. Their eyes met, not as 2 people trading polite gratitude, but as 2 souls who'd both lost and learned and somehow begun to find. As the sun began to lower, casting golden stripes across the water, Lila walked over and sat between them. She held a fresh drawing in her lap. "This one's special," she said. She showed it to them, a picture of 2 rocking chairs. One had a sunflower carved into the backrest. The other had the initials IM in bold strokes. Beneath them, written in a child's careful script, were 4 words: things that keep going. Bo swallowed hard. Ellis reached out and held Lila's hand. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Because in that moment, with the wind brushing softly across their skin and the lake catching the last light of day, they knew. Some things don't need words to be built. Some things just need to be shared. The air shifted on Sunday morning. It wasn't the weather, though the sky was overcast, and the wind held a trace of coming autumn, but something subtler. The kind of quiet that hangs before a page turns. Bo noticed it first, as he sat alone on the workshop porch, sipping black coffee from a clay mug Lila had painted in 2nd grade. The birds still sang, the trees still rustled, but beneath it all, there was something unsaid, humming between the leaves, like the land itself was holding its breath. Ira hadn't come down for breakfast. Ellis had knocked twice at his door, then again with more urgency. A staff nurse unlocked the cabin, and Bo was close enough to see the pale worry wash over Ellis's face before she slipped inside. Bo took Lila by the hand and led her back to the main house, his heart already tightening in quiet preparation. Later that day, Bo returned to Ira's cabin. Ellis was sitting on the edge of the bed, a folded blanket in her lap. The room smelled faintly of cedar and antiseptic. A small lamp cast a soft, golden glow over the nightstand. She didn't cry. Not visibly. But her face, usually composed even in tenderness, was looser now, raw at the edges, like something essential had been gently peeled away. He went in his sleep, she said, without looking up. No pain. No panic. Just drifted. Bo sat across from her. He didn't offer a speech. He just waited, letting the silence do what it does best, make space for what couldn't be rushed. Ellis reached over to the bedside drawer, pulled something out and held it up. A weathered leather wallet, edges fraying, thin from time but still intact. He carried this every day, she said, even after forgetting where he lived, even when he forgot my birthday. He never let this out of reach. She handed it to Bo. He turned it over in his hands, the leather soft and worn smooth like river stone. Inside were the usual items, a faded ID, a punch card for some long-gone diner, a black and white photo of a young woman with bright eyes. But there was also a folded piece of lined paper, old yellowed, edges cracking. Bo looked at her. Ellis nodded. Read it. He opened the letter with care. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakably thoughtful. To the man my daughter will one day love. If you're holding this, it means I've met you, or wish I had. Either way, I trust her enough to believe she's chosen well. She's strong. Too strong sometimes. She'll pretend she doesn't need anyone. But she does. She needs truth and steadiness. Someone who won't flinch when she's quiet or sharp when she's scared. If you're still around, it means you've seen through her walls, that you've stood your ground, that you've listened more than you've spoken. Please don't try to save her. Just stand beside her while she saves herself. And if she ever looks lost, hold her hand and remind her where home is. And thank you for giving an old soldier peace. Ira Bo folded the letter carefully, like it was something sacred, and handed it back. Ellis took it, but didn't tuck it away. She held it in her lap, smoothing the creases gently. I didn't know he wrote, that she said, her voice a half-whisper. Bo's throat was tight. He knew you'd find someone. She looked at him. Now, really looked. And he knew it might be you. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That evening, after the sun had dipped below the hills, Ellis asked Bo and Lila to stay a while longer at the retreat. For a few days, she said. Until after the service. It would mean a lot. Bo agreed. Not because he felt obligated, but because something inside him, something long, closed off, felt opened, like a window had been cracked after years of stale air. 2 nights later, Bo stood at the workbench, sanding the final piece of the second rocking chair. The grain was soft under his fingers, the curve exact. Ellis stood beside him, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. "Want to sign it?" he asked. She blinked. "People sign chairs." "They do now," he said, handing her a wood-burning tool. She laughed once, then leaned forward and etched her initials EM into the underside of the seat. Bo did the same. BK. They looked at the finished piece together. 2 chairs almost identical. One with a carved sunflower on the backrest, the other plain and steady. "What should we call this one?" she asked. Bo thought for a moment, then said, "The letter." Ellis smiled. Perfect. Later that night, as they sat outside under the stars, Lila asleep inside with her sketch pad resting on her chest, Ellis turned to Bo. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked softly. He exhaled. "I used to believe in timing. Then I stopped. Now, I think I believe in choices, in moments, in people doing the right thing even when it's hard." She reached for his hand. "Ira used to say, love is just remembering what matters most over and over until it sticks." Bo looked at her. "Then I guess I've started remembering." The night wrapped around them not as something empty, but as something alive, woven with memory and warmth, sorrow and beginning. A space held open by the echoes of those who'd come before, and the quiet, growing hopes of those still learning how to stay. The morning of the reading dawned clear and cool, as if the world itself had taken a long, deep breath. At the retreat's chapel, a small timber building tucked between maples that had just begun to turn gold, guests gathered in quiet clusters. Veterans old and young, in dress uniforms and flannel shirts alike. Staff members. Locals who had come to know Ira through the stories Ellis had shared. And a few who remembered him from a time long gone, when his gait was straighter and his voice louder. Bo wore a simple dark button-down. He stood with Lila just outside the doors, watching as Ellis greeted each guest with grace. No speeches, no announcements, just a steady presence. She looked beautiful in the way people do when they've been cracked open and put back together by love, not polish. Lila reached for Bo's hand. "Will you talk today?" He squeezed her small fingers. "Only if they ask." Inside the chapel was simple wooden pews, a crossbeam ceiling, sunlight filtering in through stained glass windows, depicting nothing biblical, just images of hills, rivers, and soldiers returning home. On the altar stood a portrait of Ira, the one Lila had drawn enlarged and framed. He looked younger in her rendering, but no less wise, the kind of man you'd trust with silence. The service was short, but rich. A local chaplain spoke first, sharing bits of Ira's military record. 2 deployments, a Bronze Star, and more importantly, years of mentorship for young soldiers after the wars. Stories unfolded from a few close friends. Laughter mingled with misty eyes. And then, to everyone's quiet surprise, Ellis stepped forward with a folder in her hands. She paused before the microphone took a breath, then said, "Ira Marin was my father, but I wasn't always good at being his daughter." People shifted, unsure of how to react. Ellis continued, voice steady. He was a man of grit, but he was also a man of gentleness, and I think he knew the world was more likely to remember the former. So before he passed, he left something behind. Not money, not instructions. A letter. She unfolded the worn sheet and read the same words Bo had heard days earlier, but hearing them in her voice, clear, proud, and cracking only once, changed something. When she finished, she held the letter against her chest for a moment, then looked out at the guests. "He believed in love," she said, "and in quiet men who do the right thing when no one's watching." Her eyes met Beau's. And he believed that sometimes the real miracle isn't what you're given. It's what you choose to build after loss. After the service, people lingered. Veterans came to shake Beau's hand, as if he had become a quiet symbol of the kind of man Ira had admired. Lila stood beside the rocking chair. Beau and Ellis had finished together, now displayed near the chapel entrance. She traced her fingers over the backrest where the words were engraved. In memory of Ira Marin, a quiet hero. One guest, a silver-haired woman in a U.S. Navy cap, whispered, "That man saved my brother's life in '52. Another said, "He gave me my first Bible when I came home and didn't know who I was anymore." Stories like petals laid themselves gently over grief. And then came the second surprise of the day. Ellis approached Beau outside the chapel holding a manila envelope. He raised an eyebrow. "Another letter." "Not quite." She handed it to him. "Read it." Inside was a document titled the Lila Kessler Scholarship Fund, established in honor of Ira Marin, to support children of widowed or fallen first responders and veterans, fully endowed. First recipient, Lila Kessler. Beau stared at the page, unsure whether to smile or cry. "Ellis, this is—" She gave him something he didn't even know he'd lost. Ellis said, nodding toward her portrait of Ira. "This is him giving it back." Beau blinked hard. "You didn't have to do this." She stepped closer. "I didn't." He did. "I just signed the paperwork." He looked down, voice low. "You're something else." Her smile was soft. "So are you." That night, back at the cabin, Lila sat at the kitchen table with crayons scattered around her. She was humming again, same tune, but slower now, more thoughtful. "Daddy," she said suddenly. "Does being remembered mean you're still alive?" Beau sat across from her. "I think being remembered means a part of you still matters, still moves through the world in quiet ways." She nodded, satisfied. He watched her draw in silence, then turned toward the porch, where Ellis stood, arms folded, looking out at the stars. Beau joined her. "Scholarship's too much," he said. "No, it's not. Feels like a miracle." She turned toward him. "It is. And you don't have to question it. Just receive it. That's the part most people forget how to do." He looked at her. "I'm not used to letting people carry the weight." She reached out, laced her fingers through his. "Then maybe it's time someone stood beside you." They stood like that, hand in hand, as the night settled gently around them. And somewhere inside, Beau realized the miracle wasn't the money, or the letter, or even the scholarship. It was something much quieter. Something born from trust, from shared grief, from two people learning to live again, not in spite of their scars, but with them. It was the miracle of beginning again. The morning of Honor Day broke with a sky so blue it felt hand-painted. Sunlight streamed through the maples surrounding the retreat grounds, their leaves now beginning to flush with the orange and rust blush of early October. The air was crisp, laced with wood smoke, and the quiet hush of people gathering for something that felt bigger than a ceremony, something sacred. In the field beside the chapel, folding chairs were arranged in neat rows. A podium set under an American flag hung between two cedar posts. Beside it stood the rocking chair Beau and Ellis had built. Fresh flowers adorned the seat, white lilies and yellow sunflowers. Someone had even placed a bronze plaque on its armrest, reading, "In memory of Staff Sergeant Ira Marin." He gave quiet where the world gave noise. Beau adjusted his tie in the mirror, an old one Claire had bought him for a wedding they never got to attend. His hands weren't quite steady, but he didn't mind the nerves. It felt right to be unsettled today. From the corner of the cabin, Lila stepped out in a simple navy dress, her hair brushed back into a braid. She held a folded piece of paper in one hand, and looked more grown up than Bo could have imagined. "You sure you want to read it?" he asked softly. She nodded. Ira said I could. "I want to keep that promise." He smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "Then I'll be in the front row." The crowd had doubled since the memorial. Veterans from neighboring counties, town officials, young cadets in pressed uniforms. The retreat staff stood in quiet formation behind them, many with tissues already in hand. Ellis took the podium first. Her voice was steady, her words graceful but full of weight. "My father believed in invisible service, the kind that doesn't make headlines or end up in documentaries. He believed in sitting beside people, not above them, and listening. He believed in saying less and doing more." She paused, catching her breath. "And so we honor him today, not with fanfare, but with what he would have loved, most new chairs for tired feet, warm hands for heavy hearts, and a space to remember who we are when we are at our best." A long, respectful silence followed. Then she introduced Lila. Bo watched his daughter walk up to the podium with her paper clutched tightly in both hands. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew stronger. "My name is Lila," she began, "and I'm 7. I met Mr. Ira at a diner. Some people weren't nice to him, but my dad stood up and helped. That's how we became friends." She paused to breathe. "Mr. Ira told me once that old trees still matter because they give shade. I drew a picture of him with strong shoulders and bright eyes. I think that's how he should be remembered." She unfolded a small drawing and held it up for the crowd to see a watercolor of Ira beneath a large oak tree, with kids gathered under its branches. "And one more thing," she added, her voice rising slightly. "Mr. Ira wrote a letter about love, and now my daddy and Ms. Ellis are helping people because of that letter. So I think the real way to honor him is to keep giving people a place to sit when they're tired and someone to listen when they're sad." The silence that followed wasn't still. It breathed. It moved. Bo could barely see through the burn in his eyes as the crowd rose in a slow, standing ovation. After the ceremony, Ellis found Bo behind the chapel, standing beneath the same tree where Ira used to sit. "You okay?" she asked gently. He nodded. "I didn't know grief could feel so full." She stood beside him, their shoulders almost touching. That's what legacy does. It fills in the hollow places. Bo turned toward her. "You were incredible." She raised an eyebrow. "Did you hear your daughter? I nearly lost it when she said, 'strong shoulders and bright eyes.'" "She sees things that haven't happened yet," he said, "and sometimes things other people have forgotten." They stood in silence a moment longer, watching guests mingle share stories, wipe their cheeks without shame. Then Ellis reached into her coat pocket and handed Bo a small envelope. "What's this?" He opened it. Inside was a key. To what Ellis smiled. To the cabin just past the lake. The one with the 2 porches. "I've been holding it for a program director we haven't hired yet." Bo stared at her. "Ellis," she stepped closer, "I want you and Lila to stay. Not just as guests, as part of this place. Build chairs, teach woodworking, help the kids who don't have words. This isn't charity, it's a home, and it only works if it's built by people like you." He was quiet a long time, the key warming in his hand. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure," she said. He looked toward the lake, then back at her. "Then we're in." Ellis smiled, relieved, radiant, and took his hand. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Bo, Ellis, and Lila returned to the workshop. Bo placed the key on the windowsill and rolled up his sleeves. Ellis lit the lanterns. Lila spread out her drawings across the work table, humming. There was no grand declaration, no cinematic kiss, just the steady rhythm of wood against sandpaper, the smell of cedar in the air, and 3 people who had once been broken, quietly piecing themselves into something whole. Outside, the first stars blinked awake, and the wind carried the faint sound of a child's voice, echoing the words she had once drawn, things that keep going. The cabin beyond the lake had stood empty for years. It was simple, with a wraparound porch that creaked underfoot, and windows that caught the morning sun just right. A fireplace nestled against the back wall, surrounded by stones Ira himself had helped lay when the retreat was first built. No frills, no luxury, just space and silence, and a view that made you stop whatever you were doing and breathe. Now it was home. Bo stepped outside in the early light, a mug of hot coffee in one hand and a folded flannel tossed over his shoulder. The air smelled of pine and something softer, distant smoke from the fire pit dew on wood. He looked out over the still lake, where the mist was just beginning to lift. On the porch rail sat Lila's newest drawing, weighted down by a pine cone, a rocking chair carved with a sunflower, another with initials, and between them, a third one smaller. Untouched. He smiled. Behind him, he heard the familiar rhythm of bare feet on old floorboards. "You're up early," Ellis murmured, stepping beside him with her own cup of tea. Her hair was still tousled from sleep, her sweatshirt loose and worn, but her eyes were bright. "Habit," Bo said. She leaned into the post beside him, her shoulder brushing his. Ira would have loved seeing this place lived in again. Bo looked at her, his gaze soft. "He built it for people like us." Ellis nodded, people trying to put the pieces back in the right places. By mid-morning, the retreat had come alive. Children from a visiting veterans family group were scattered across the field building birdhouses with Bo's guidance. Each one had its own imperfections, crooked roofs, mismatched nails, but Bo didn't correct them. He showed them how to sand the splinters, how to keep going even when it didn't look perfect. Like life, he told a boy named Mason, who'd cried over a cracked side panel. "You don't throw it out. You fix what you can and make it yours." Across the way, Ellis sat at a picnic table with 3 teenage girls, teaching them how to repot herbs in old mason jars. One of them had asked if Ellis was the rich lady who bought the place, to which she had simply smiled and said, "No. I'm the woman who finally came home." That afternoon, a delivery truck rolled down the gravel path. Inside was a wooden crate addressed to the Kesslers and Marin family, Lake Retreat. Ellis opened it with a crowbar, curious. Inside, wrapped in linen and packed with straw, was a hand-carved wooden sign. The letters were bold, burned into the grain, with care. The porch light underneath in smaller script, a place to rest, a place to return, a place to begin again. There was no sender's name, but Bo recognized the work, one of Ira's old friends, a man who spoke little but built monuments in his own way. Bo and Ellis hung the sign that evening with Lila's help. She stood on a step stool, hammering the last nail, her face serious with the importance of the act. When they finished, the 3 of them stood back and looked at it in silence. "I like it," Lila said. "Me too," Ellis replied. Bo just nodded. "Feels right." That night, the 3 of them sat on the porch as twilight softened into indigo. The rocking chairs creaked in rhythm. Fireflies blinked across the field like stars that had come down to listen. Lila curled up with a blanket and a book on one chair, while Ellis and Bo shared the second. "I never imagined this," Ellis said quietly. "Which part?" Bo asked. "All of it. You. Her. This porch. The stillness without the emptiness." Bo looked down at their joined hands. "I didn't think I deserved a second chance." Ellis turned to him. "You didn't deserve what happened to you either. But here you are. And here we are." He exhaled, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. They sat that way for a while, the silence not needing to be filled. Then Ellis added almost as an afterthought, Do you think he knows Bo didn't ask who? He just said, yes. Much later, after Lila had fallen asleep with her blanket still wrapped around her, and the porch light above the door cast a golden glow on the floorboards, Bo stepped inside to grab something. He returned holding an old shoebox, sat down beside Ellis, handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside were bits and pieces Claire's sunflower hairpin, Lila's first drawing of the two of them, a photo of Bo in uniform at the fire station back when he still believed service was something you had to prove. And at the very bottom, a letter. Unopened. Addressed to the man who comes next. Ellis looked up, startled. Bo's voice was low. She wrote it before one of her volunteer trips, just in case. I found it in a drawer after she passed. I never opened it. Ellis hesitated. Do you want me to? He shook his head. No. I want us to. Together. So Ellis unfolded the letter, careful not to tear the old paper. Her voice was steady but full as she read aloud. Dear stranger, if you're holding this, you've found your way into the life of the two people I love most. Thank you for that. Thank you for showing up. Please be gentle with them. With Bo, he hides his pain in silence. With Lila, she sees more than she says. Love them slowly, steadily. Build something with them. It doesn't have to be perfect, just real. And never ever let them forget that they were always meant to love again. Claire. By the time the letter ended, Ellis was crying softly. Bo's eyes were wet too, but he didn't look away. Instead, he reached over, pulled her close, and pressed his lips gently to her temple. Thank you, he whispered. For what, she asked. For being the miracle I never saw coming. In the stillness that followed the porch, light flickered, once, then steadied its glow, stretching softly across the field, touching the chairs, the trees, the workshop, and the lake. A beacon not just for guests, but for anyone who had ever been lost, and somehow gently found again. If this story touched something deep within you, we'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and share your corner of the map with us. It's a beautiful thing to feel how far kindness can travel. And if you'd like more heartfelt stories like this filled with hope, healing, and the quiet strength of ordinary people, you're warmly invited to subscribe. No pressure, just a porch light left on for when you feel like coming back. Thank you truly for spending your time here with us. We're so grateful to share these moments with you. Until next time, take gentle care.